You know, after our last deep dive on Naturog innovation, quite a few of you reached out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, asking specifically about Kesser and Steen. Seems like those two students really, well, they caught people's attention.
That makes sense. They do sound intriguing.
So let's do it. Let's dive right in today and figure out who they are, what makes them tick, you know?
Sounds good. And we actually have a pretty unique source for this, don't we?
We do. It's an email straight from their teacher, Professor Mr. Hendricks.
Right. So it's a real insider's view on these two. They're only 11, I think.
11, yeah.
Yeah,
Which makes his observations even more interesting. It's not often you get that kind of direct insight.
definitely not.
Okay, so the mission today is pretty clear. Let's get to know Kesser and Steen. We'll talk about their work in the class, their interests, how they, work together.
And Professor Hendricks really emphasized their, unusual curiosity and thinking skills, especially for their age.
Exactly. So let's unpack that. Where should we start? Maybe with them as individuals?
Good idea. Let's start with Steen. Professor Hendricks paints him as the more outgoing one.
Okay.
Blonde hair, freckles, and just always curious. Apparently, he's the kind of kid who might be doing one thing, but then something else catches his eye, and poof, he's off investigating that instead. Easily sidetracked, maybe, but in a good way.
Ha! I know the type. Hendricks mentioned he has this eye for detail in the chaotic. That's a great phrase.
It really is. And it sounds like he's totally at home outdoors, exploring ditches, forests, the fjord. Just jumps right in.
Not afraid to get his hands dirty then. And apparently his way of solving problems isn't always, point A to point B.
No, definitely not. Professor Hendricks called it winding paths. He seems to gather ideas and bits and pieces of materials as he goes along.
Collecting things, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, exactly. Impressions, maybe scraps of stuff for projects. It's interesting, right? Because that kind of unstructured approach, maybe it leads to more unexpected solutions sometimes, even if it takes a bit longer.
That's a really good point. Does that free exploration maybe unlock more creativity than just sticking to the plan? Now, Kesser sounds, well, different.
Quite different based on the email.
Mm-hmm.
He's described as more thoughtful, calmer.
Okay.
And he has this really strong ability to focus,
Oh.
to take one idea and just stick with it until it's done, even if it's tough.
That kind of focus at 11? That's pretty remarkable.
It really is. And it sounds like while Steen's pulling in all these random details, Kesser's the one thinking about the structure, the big picture.
Holding it all together?
Kind of, yeah. Hendricks says he asks a lot of questions, but not like challenging questions. More like he genuinely wants to understand how things work.
Ah, so a natural feel for systems, both
Mm.
nature and, human-made stuff.
Seems that way. It's a neat contrast, isn't it? Steen the explorer, Kesser the systems guy.
Yeah, you can see how they'd, complement each other. Professor Hendricks called them an unlikely but effective pair. That sums it up nicely.
It does. And he points out how their differences actually make the team work better. They inspire each other, but also sort of keep each other grounded.
How so? Steen brings the energy and maybe sparks ideas.
Exactly. His sort of broad observations might open up paths Kesser hadn't thought of.
And Kesser's focus helps turn Steen's maybe sometimes scattered ideas into something solid, something real.
Precisely. It's that balance.
And beyond just their styles, they apparently share this core interest, right? This fascination with how nature and, us, how we're all connected.
Yes, that seems to be the thread running through a lot of their projects and nature innovation.
Okay, so let's get into those projects. Professor Hendricks gave some great examples, didn't he?
He did. They really show their strengths and how they work together. First up was the water cycle.
Right. And they didn't just, look at diagrams in a book.
No way.
Yeah.
Very hands-on. They were actually out there collecting rainwater, measuring evaporation, testing how different soils hold water. Real experiments.
In the schoolyard. And they even built little models to see how runoff works. But the coolest part was that it led to an actual idea, a practical thing. This simple rain trap for gardens designed to help reduce flooding.
Wow, okay. So observation leading directly to innovation. That's pretty cool.
It really is. Then there was the biodegradation project.
Yes,
Yeah.
composting. And again, totally experimental. They built their own compost bins.
Right, and then they started messing with the variables, temperature, humidity, light, seeing what difference it made to how things broke down.
Proper scientific method in action.
Yeah.
Very systematic.
And this is where you really see their individual interests shine,
How so?
Well, Kesser, the systems thinker, got really into the microorganisms, the fungi, the bacteria doing the work.
Makes sense. Understanding the how.
While Steen was immediately thinking practical uses, like, hey, can we make fertilizer from seaweed and our lunch scraps?
Applying it directly. Brilliant.
And they didn't just theorize, they actually tried stuff like bokashi, that fermented composting method.
Oh, right.
And they put seaweed in soil to see if it made plants grow better, taking it beyond the classroom.
That's fantastic. Real application.
Yeah.
What about the local ecosystem stuff around the fjord?
Equally hands-on. They weren't just looking from afar. They were like wading in streams.
Mapping them.
Measuring pH, water temperature, noting down all the wildlife they saw. Active exploration.
And that led to a discovery, didn't it? Something about the watercolor?
Yeah, ochre runoff, that reddish stuff from iron oxide.
Okay.
And instead of just saying, look at that, they immediately started thinking, how can we fix this? How can we get some of this iron out before it hits the fjord?
Wow. Okay. Problem solving on the spot.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And they built filters, like small-scale test filters.
No way.
Yeah. You can just picture them tinkering by the water. And again, you see their dynamic. Steen's probably focused on the filter design, how it works physically.
While Kesser's diving deep into the iron bacteria and nutrient cycles and how it all fits together ecologically.
Exactly. It's such a clear pattern.
Okay, one more example. Recycling and resources.
Yes. This one really shows their resourcefulness. They didn't just talk about recycling. They went digging in the school's depot, the storage area.
Looking for junk.
Basically, yeah. Discarded stuff, old bike parts, wooden pallets, wires, stuff they could repurpose.
Smart. Waste not, want not.
So they started off planning to build like an insect hotel, which is already pretty cool, maybe with rainwater collection. But it morphed into something way more ambitious, this experimentarium for little creatures.
An experimentarium? What does that even mean?
It sounds like a controlled environment where they could study small creatures and microclimates, and it even had manual controls for temperature and humidity.
Whoa. That's quite a jump from an insect hotel.
Right. Shows incredible creativity and problem solving. And Professor Hendricks said that project was really well received.
I bet. It sounds like it pulled together biology, chemistry, physics, and just pure imagination.
Totally. They weren't afraid to just try things and let the idea evolve.
So summing it all up, what's Professor Hendricks' main takeaway about these two?
Well, he sees them as just fundamentally experimental, deeply curious. And they ask these amazing questions, the kind that make you stop and think.
Insightful questions.
Yeah. And he stresses their respect for nature. It's not just a subject for them.
No, it feels more like something they feel connected to, something that needs our attention, our understanding, if we're going to coexist properly.
It's about balance, right? They're not just learning about the environment, they're actively engaging with it, trying to find real solutions.
That's a really powerful way to learn.
So yeah, to wrap up our picture of them, Steen, he's the energetic explorer, the detail guy, always finding those winding paths to solutions.
Right. And Kesser, the calm, focused thinker, the one who sees the structure, understands the system, and brings that focus.
An unlikely pair, maybe, but man, they really work well together.
They really do. And, thinking about them, it does make you wonder, what can we, as adults, what can we learn from how they approach things? That natural curiosity, that willingness to just dive in and experiment.
That hands-on approach, getting your hands dirty, literally.
Exactly. Maybe it's a good reminder for all of us to, try and recapture some of that wonder. To not be afraid to explore and ask why a bit more often.
That's a great question to leave people with. Maybe we should all think about our own ways of exploring the world. Could we be a bit more like Kesser and Steen sometimes? Definitely food for thought. After our last deep dive on Naturog innovation, quite a few of you reached out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, asking specifically about Kesser and Steen.